Dun, 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 dun. Hey, welcome out there, everyone in YouTube land, to Lancing with Myself, the weekly Tuesday show where I give you 5 minutes of my best advice and ancient wisdom about how to be a game designer and creative when you're low on spoons and low on cash. At DevCon, the Australian convention for tabletop game designers, the other week, the lovely Jonathan Kalea asked me about the issue of bad playtesters and bad feedback, and how do you identify bad feedback and what do you do with it. It is true that you're not always going to get something useful when you are playtesting, but I think the way to turn that question around, though, is to make sure that you know what you're asking. Not every person is going to be able to follow instructions, but if you understand what you're actually testing, that will tell you whether it falls into the bag of useful or not. For example, once upon a time I was a tester on Shadow Fist, the card game, and they had made some decisions about how they were going to do a series of new cards. One of the playtesters was like, no, look, that's not balanced because of this, this, and this. And they went, look, we've made our decision. That's how we want to do it. So just test something else. But that guy wouldn't let it go. He just kept going and going and going. And, you know, that was really unuseful and really unhelpful, and it just kind of derailed the whole chat. And then he was like, well, if you're not going to listen to me, then why am I even testing for you? You know, he just missed the whole point that they'd already made a choice. They'd already made a decision. They weren't testing that. So nothing he said was relevant or useful to them. And he decided to get mad about that because he thought he was doing something else. So when you're a playtester, don't do that. When you are playtesting, you are like a scientist and an engineer. You're trying to isolate elements and test those elements. You're trying to actually test one specific question. If you know what your question is, you will be better able to identify what goes into the useful box and what isn't. You know, if you're there to test art, then you can just ignore anything about that people say about mechanics, right? If you're there to test the clarity of wording of things, then you can ignore whatever anyone else says about, you know, anything else. If you're looking at the mechanics, it doesn't matter what they say about art. And you can preface this, of course. You can go and say, look, this is where the game is. This is what I talked about last time, is you need to give the history of your game. Where is it in the stage, and what the playtesters should be focusing on. So you're trying to set up that experiment. Like, okay, this game is very early, it's very rough. Please ignore that this and this. For example, when I was testing Snatch Phrase at PAX, Snatch Phrase was an idea that came to me really quickly. I had to prototype it very quickly. I didn't expect it to get into the event that I can't remember the name of, where we get to test our games and show them off. But it did, so I had to prototype it quickly, and it was kind of messy, and my penmanship was terrible. So I was, you know, very early on, I would say, look, I understand the tiles aren't very readable, my penmanship is bad, I'm working on solutions to those things. Please, if you can just ignore that and try to see if you can enjoy the game, you know, regardless, and give me feedback regardless. And a lot of the feedback I got, of course, was, I can't read the writing, hard to read, but I did ask, you know, what was the worst thing about the game? And if that was the thing they thought of, that's still useful to me. It means the only things they could think of were things that I already asked them to ignore. That means everything I wanted them to focus on, theoretically at least, was fine. The mechanics worked fine. So that was an example of me figuring out, look, here are the things that I haven't got control over. There are things that are going to be outside the scope of this test, and I'm going to ask my players to ignore that. Anything they say that doesn't ignore that, that fails to follow that instruction and looks at other things, I can just ignore. And that's the first step of identifying, you know. So anything that does fixate on that, is going to be useful to you, and you shouldn't throw it away. The only other thing as well is that don't always listen to how people want to fix things. That's another kind of bad result. And again, that goes beyond the scope of the playtest. The playtest is, did X work in the way that it should, the way that you wanted? It's not, how can I fix it? That is a different question. And as soon as they start giving that kind of feedback, you can tune it out. Don't tell them to shut up. Just go, yep, interesting. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Make a note, you know. Sometimes it's a good idea. Sometimes what they're saying is something else as well. That's another thing that you can talk about, that I'll talk about next time. What playtesters say versus what they mean. Tune in next time for more on that and playtesting with Lansing by myself. Till then, play games, pat dogs, be good, have fun.